The letter arrived 3 months after the war had ended. The handwriting on the envelope was so familiar, so achingly familiar, it made her heart stop for a beat. The sender, her son, was already gone. This isn't a story about war, not really. It's not about grand strategies or the names of battles you read in textbooks. This is a story about people, about the quiet echoes that conflicts leave behind in homes and in hearts. She lived in a small, quiet village nestled in the French countryside, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the seasons and the tolling of the church bell. Her world, once so complete, was fractured in 1916 when her only son, barely a man, left for the front. He stood on the platform of the little train station, his uniform still stiff and new. He promised he would write. And he did. For a time the letters arrived like clockwork. They were her lifeline, little scraps of paper that traveled from the mud and chaos of the trenches back to the tranquility of her kitchen table. Each one carried hope, scribbled in pencil under candlelight. He wrote about the food, about his comrades, about the surprising beauty of a sunrise over a desolate field. He never wrote about the fear. She read between the lines, of course. A mother always does. She would read them over and over, his words a shield against the dread that crept in at night. Then the letters started to slow. The reliable stream became a trickle, then an agonizing silence. Weeks turned into months. The postman would pass her gate, offering a sad smile and a shake of his head. Still, she waited. Hope is a stubborn thing. Every morning she'd listen for the crunch of gravel on the lane. Every footstep that approached her door made her breath catch in her throat. Every knock was a potential miracle. She lived in a state of suspended animation, her life on pause, waiting for a single piece of paper to press play again. When the church bells finally rang out, not for a Sunday service, but with a wild, joyful clamor that shook the very air, she knew. Peace, the Great War was over. Her neighbors poured into the village square, weeping and embracing. They celebrated the end of the slaughter, the return of their boys. And in the midst of that joyous crowd, she felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. It was over. He was finally coming home. The waiting was done. She pictured his face, imagined the weight of his hug, the sound of his laughter filling the quiet house once more. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Other sons returned, gaunt and haunted, but alive. They were celebrated, welcomed back into the fold. Her son was not among them. The official notice had come, a cold, formal piece of paper that spoke of sacrifice and honor. But a mother's hope doesn't listen to official notices. It listens for a footstep on the path. 3 months after the armistice, the letter arrived. It was crumpled and stained, bearing the marks of its long, arduous journey. The postman handed it to her with a gentle, pitying look. She took it with trembling hands, his handwriting. It was a ghost, a voice from another time. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she had read all his other letters, and unfolded it. He wrote from a cold, wet trench, the words smudged by dampness. He apologized for the delay in writing. The mail service was a mess, he explained. He talked about the ceaseless rain, the cold that seeped into his bones. He said he was thinking of her, of home, of the warmth of her kitchen. And then, the line that broke her. He said he would try his best to survive. He would try to make it home. She looked at the date written at the top of the page. It was 2 weeks before he was killed. 2 weeks before the war officially ended. He never knew. He never knew that peace was just around the corner. He died believing the war would stretch on forever, holding on to a sliver of hope in the darkness. And she, in turn, never knew that this final message was on its way, a last "I love you," traveling through the broken machinery of war. He was writing to a future he would never see. She folded the paper carefully, the creases aligning with the worn folds he had made himself. She walked to the mantelpiece and placed it beside his photograph, the one of him in his new uniform, smiling with all the unshakable confidence of youth. The war ended on paper on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Treaties were signed, bells rang, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. But for her, sitting in her quiet house with a letter from a ghost, it never truly did. The silence in the rooms was louder than any artillery shell. The war wasn't over. It had simply moved inside. History remembers the grand narratives. It remembers the dates, the generals, the turning points of battles. We build monuments to the glorious dead and mark anniversaries with solemn parades. But history often forgets the quiet, personal wars that continue long after the guns fall silent. It forgets the mothers, the fathers, the wives, and the children who are left to navigate the landscape of loss. We remember the war, but it is just as important, if not more so, that we remember the people. We remember the boy in the trench, writing a letter of hope he would never see fulfilled. And we remember the mother in a quiet French village for whom the war would never, ever end. Thank you for listening. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing for more stories that look beyond the headlines of history.